Hi everybody, I'm Stacy. Welcome back to my channel, My Life in Scrubs. I am a registered nurse. I've been in healthcare for 28 years and I'm just sharing stories about my journey. Um, Last time I talked about some of my LPN experiences. I did work as an LPN for 11 years before becoming an RN, and then when my son was about 3, I wanted to get into being certified as a wound specialist, and in the state that I lived in, that was not possible for an LPN to do. I had to become an RN if I wanted to be recognized as wound certified. There were no specific regulations at the time that said I couldn't do it, but I was told by other facilities and the facility that I worked at that it likely would need to be a registered nurse position. So I did pursue becoming an associate's degree nurse when I was in my 30s and my son was about 3 years old, with the intention of becoming wound certified and doing wound management. Needless to say, that did not happen. I um, I did stop working while I was in school because I discovered that I was not able to manage, my son and school and work. I tried at first and I just realized that the subject matter and the time was too intense for me to think about work. Thankfully, I was able to just focus on school and my son at the time. So I got my RN. Um, it was a very grueling program. I was very proud of myself when I completed it. During the time that I went to the ADN program, I also developed idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. That's a mouthful. So I had an episode where I had to do a presentation, and I found that I was really nervous. So I had talked to my doctor about just being really nervous doing these presentations in class. I've always been capable of doing a good one-to-one, but when you put me in front of a group of people, something just makes me sweat, dizzy, and panic. Even though these are the same people I've been talking to one-to-one and, in the classroom setting. I had to do a presentation and it was on spinal cord injuries, and wouldn't you know it, I fell down the stairs after I gave my presentation. If you could have seen it, it would have been great to watch, because when I was going to school, I think when you're a nurse, you got to be funny. You got to be funny a little bit, because the subjects that we deal with and the things that we're doing can really break you down if you don't have a good sense of humor. I am a bigger girl, and I've had times when I wasn't, I've had times when I was, but I was a bigger girl when I was going to the ADN program. And after I gave my presentation, I was wearing these heels they caught on the stairs. I saw all these skinny little girls down at the bottom of the stairs, and I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna fall on these girls and break them. I caught myself. I was hanging upside down on the banister. I'm so glad that thing was sturdy enough to hold me, because let me tell you that that was something. Um, so I decided, after doing a presentation on spinal cord injuries, that I would do a demonstration of how that could be possible. Thankfully, I didn't hurt myself. So, when you're in nursing school, you can only miss so many clinicals and you have to get a certain grade point average. You need a higher grade point average than somebody in a different class, perhaps. I don't know if that's changed since I went to nursing school, but I needed an 80% to get a C and pass the nursing class. Um, we talked about a lot of disorders and things like that in school, and one of the things we talked about was ITP. It didn't like stick in my brain, and we were of course talking about normal labs and things like that. I developed a petechial rash, I looked like I had polka dots. I had red little spots all over my body. And because of the anxiety, I had started taking an antidepressant, and I have a fast heart rate, so I was also on a beta blocker. Um, always research side effects before you start taking a medication, and research adverse interactions. Um, it's rare for those things to happen, but I'm a weirdo and it happened. And I went to my doctor with this rash all over my body, and she said, yeah, you're overweight. You need to lose weight, because the rash was primarily focused on my legs. And she said to me that I needed to lose weight. And I said, well, could we do a CBC anyway? We did a CBC. I went home. The next day I had a clinical. I was going to get to go to a prison rotation. It was just one rotation where we went to um, a prison, or like a place for people who were um, they were criminals, but they were more like in a lockdown mental unit, psych unit. And I thought that was going to be really interesting. So my doctor calls me in the morning and she's like, hey, you know what? Your platelets are at 11,000. And I was like, yeah, okay. And she said, well, I think that you should probably go and see a hematologist today. I have an appointment set up for you. I said, no, do I have to do it today? Because I can't miss any clinicals and I've come this far. I mean, I was right on the edge of finishing the nursing program. And I said, I really would like to finish my clinical today and go tomorrow maybe. And she said, no, I don't think you understand what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that you could spontaneously bleed internally and you need to go see a hematologist. And if you choose not to, then you're doing it at your own risk. I believe it or not, I wasn't going to go. And of course, the girls that were with me said, maybe you should go. And they were carpooling with me. It was my day to carpool, so I had to take them back to their cars. And I went to the hematologist. And he said, okay, we're going to put you on this high dose of prednisone, um, and then we'll just monitor you. I said, okay, I'm in the nursing program. Can I go to school and do my clinicals? He's like, it shouldn't be a problem. So they drew my blood, and he said, you know what, scratch that. I can't send you home. You're going to have to go get a platelet transfusion because your platelets are now 2,000. So I went and got a platelet transfusion, and I went to school the next day. I was determined to get through that. And all throughout the remainder of my ADN program, I was on a very high dose of steroids. And my teachers were amazing. They worked with me on getting through those last classes. And after I was finished with my graduation, I did some chemotherapy and stuff like that. But I was really proud of myself for getting through that program, because I'm just telling you, 150 milligrams of prednisone makes you feel no pain, makes you not sleep, and it makes you hungry, and it makes your face get that classic moon face that people talk to you about with steroids. So I made it through the ADN program. I made it through my ITP, and I'm in remission and have been for many years now. But I say always research side effects, because I felt like it was that new medication that was introduced because one of the weird side effects was ITP. Thrombocytopenic purpura. I think they call it something else now. Anyway, I'm in remission. I finished the nursing program, and I felt really thankful. I felt really thankful for the people that helped me get through it, and that was my classmates and my teachers and my family, because without them, I couldn't have done it. You know, I had a little boy, and I was going to the doctor, getting blood work done, and in between that, I was going to school. And even during that process, I ended up getting shingles. When you're immune compromised, you can get shingles. And let me tell you, if your patient tells you that it's painful, it truly is. Um, so when I walked across that stage with my big round moon face, I was very proud of myself. But when I finished my nursing program and I passed my boards, I went back to the place where I had worked for 11 years as an LPN in hopes to resume working as the treatment nurse. That is what I had been doing for the last 7 years before I went back to school to become an RN, was working as a treatment nurse. And at the time, they said they couldn't hire RNs, that they were on a hiring freeze and they were no longer taking RNs. And this company, I'd worked for them for 11 years, and they had, said they would take me back when I finished. I gave them my proper notice. I had some illusion in my brain that a position would just be open for me, but life goes on and people have to still find other nurses to fill your position when you're gone, and maybe that position won't be there when you come back. And I think I had this unrealistic idea that it would just be there waiting for me. So the treatment position wasn't open anymore, and the dream that I had changed. And I have often said, if that didn't happen, that I probably would have worked in that company for the rest of my life. I never would have changed jobs, ventured out into other areas, or any of those things, because I was perfectly content living in that facility and working in any capacity that I could have worked in. So I did find other jobs, work in other capacities as a registered nurse. Some of the things that I did as a registered nurse besides long-term care was I did a little stint in dermatology, which was really interesting. That's very specialized, very hard to get into, and I kind of regret getting out of that because it was a good gig. And it was very interesting and different than anything else I've ever done. But I did move away from the state that I was living in, and therefore I did have to give that job up and continued on in long-term care. So I did long-term care most of my career, and during COVID, I did actually transition into hospice. And I may have already talked about this before, but I had been working as an assistant director of nursing in long-term care, and it was very challenging because nobody wanted to take that home to their family. And you had to test for it every week. And anytime someone popped positive, whether that be an employee or whether that be a resident of the facility, you had to make provisions for that. And I did get to log all of that, which was a really interesting part of my job as an assistant director of nursing. I took an infection preventionalist course so that I could track the infections in the facility. Wasn't great at it, but I did have to keep a log of all the residents that were tested for COVID, and I had to swab everybody once a week, and that included staff and patients. And so when somebody did pop positive on those little instant swabs, you would have to put them in a different unit, and that unit wasn't set up around the clock and it wasn't staffed. COVID was kind of winding down just a little bit. It wasn't as severe as it had been in the beginning, and things were still locked down, but like the doors were locked. You couldn't just come into the facility and see your loved one. You had to sign in, you had to check your temperature, you had to do all of these things to get inside. And we had a warm unit, a cold unit, and a hot unit, which of course was your COVID unit. And staffing that was very challenging. Whoever worked that unit could only be in that unit. They couldn't be assisting with other patients. Residents, and nobody wanted to take that home to their family, and we were still seeing people die from it. We were still seeing people die from it. So it really just became overwhelming. I spent a lot of time trying to be an assistant director of nursing, and also sometimes I had to cover the floor, and I found myself at work for so many hours that I began to be burned out. And I saw a hospice position come open in Indeed and applied to it. Because I had been working in long-term care and worked hand in hand with hospice many times over the years, and so I got into hospice. And I'm really shocked, because when I transitioned over into hospice, um, I didn't have a clue about really what hospice was. I had major respect for hospice nurses, and I loved having them in my facility, and I loved being able to coordinate care with them for my residents. When a patient was on hospice, they got amazing care because they were getting multidisciplinary care from two different teams of people. And I just thought, oh, I would really love to go into hospice, and I thought I kind of knew what it was, but I didn't. So I think I know hospice is a topic that people sometimes have questions about. I am not going to be the person that's going to go into great detail about it, but I would love to talk about my experience with hospice and answer any questions. So I will talk a little bit about my hospice journey in my next video. So I thank you for watching. If you would like to learn more about nursing and nursing things, then please consider liking, subscribing, and following, and we'll take this journey together, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I hope to see you soon.